To learn more about the Alabama Education Lab and receive notifications about stories and events, sign up for its newsletter, EdChat. See past stories here. In 2020, Ophelia Talley was suddenly handed the opportunity, as she saw it, to homeschool her son, Noah. "I had wanted to homeschool, and then COVID happened, and I was just like, well, we're trying it," said the mum of two, who had previously sent her older son to kindergarten class in Huntsville. Thousands of families learned at home during the pandemic. But while many returned to traditional classroom settings when schools reopened, a record number of families, and a record number of Black families, like the Talleys, opted out of school systems altogether. "I'm seeing and hearing about lots of new families," said Cheryl Fields Smith, an associate professor of education at the University of Georgia who studies the prevalence of homeschooling among African Americans in the United States. "We're seeing more and more working families, and single parents, not stereotypical homeschooling situations, and they're finding ways to make their schedules work and share resources and teach in unique ways." Fields Smith said that throughout their time in the New World, Black families have pursued various ways to get an education, including relying on their own educators and community, even when it was illegal to learn to read or teach others. As a result of that heritage, she said Black families she interviews tend to have a focus on shared, cultural and oral history and a determination to claim a better education for their children. Homeschooling is one way to push against public school systems that are often segregated and report poor outcomes for Black children. During slavery, if an African American slave learned how to read and write, they didn't keep it to themselves, they found ways to secretly teach each other, she said. "We have always been teaching ourselves for the uplift of our people." Over the past year, a statistically significant number of Black households started homeschooling at least one child, moving the total number of households nationally from 3% to 16%, according to Sarah Grady, a statistician with the U.S. Department of Education, who spoke at a recent Harvard Kennedy School discussion. "It's tough to know how many families nationally might stick with homeschooling as pandemic restrictions ease, but substantial enrollment shifts could devastate public school funding and produce long-term effects." Fierce debates around the country around in-person and remote learning efforts during the pandemic often cited virtual learning's impact on minority children and families. Yet Black families have been highly skeptical of efforts to return to in-person learning and have reported high levels of concern about potential health risks of sending children back to school buildings. At least some chose not just to stay remote but to stay at home for good.